Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk. Today, we are joined by former NFL general manager Pat Kirwan, now, of course, a host on Sirius XM NFL Radio of Moving the Chains with Jim Miller every Monday through Friday, 3 to 7 on Sirius XM NFL Radio, channel 88. I listen to it every day on the way home from work. Pat, I appreciate the time today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, John. Thanks for having me. Big fan of the New York Giants, so I'm anxious to have this conversation.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking to you about this too. Just so the folks understand, we're recording this on Friday. It's going to air first thing Monday morning. So if a couple things happen over the weekend, I'll apologize ahead of time. This is a busy time of year, Pat. So as a former GM, tell me what this weekend was like for you heading into that negotiating window opening up on Monday at noon.
Well, it depended on if you had cap space or if you didn't have cap space. So if you're underneath, you guys are lucky you're not. You're 41 million over. You're getting ready to jump out and go after the guys you want and re-sign your own if you care to. And, you know, there's going to be some battles for guys. But the teams that are over the cap and have to still liquidate, I've been in that situation. And the next couple of days are going to be crazy. So I'm glad you mentioned Monday might be a lot different than today. You're first off, way before today, your pro personnel department has studied every contract and they know where the cap casualties are going to be, predicting most of them. We've already had almost 50 players cut and put on these lists, and they're saturating some of the position groups, like safety is getting loaded up with a lot of players. Not so much at offensive tackle. There's not many tackles in free agency. And then you got to learn how to speculate on marrying the draft pool with the free agent pool so you know what you need to do now and what you can wait to do in the draft. So it is kind of crazy. But as I look at the Giants, a couple of real positives in my mind. 49 guys under contract, $41 million of cap space, second youngest team in the league. No crazy voidable contracts where there's, you know, the ghost in the closet where so many teams are using it now. It's like a double credit card and you don't do it. So I like the sound nature of where the Giants are at. Now they got to go out and make good decisions in the draft and certainly in free agency.
Okay, so I want to go on the details on a couple of things you mentioned. Two guys that the Giants have that we still think they have interest in re-signing. They decided not to tag either player, Saquon Barkley and Xavier McKinney. So interesting markets at those two positions, probably the two most depressed markets in terms of position groups in the league right now, Pat. And both those groups have been flooded with high quality, Pro Bowl level in some cases, veteran players. So the Giants are going to let their two guys go test the market, at least as of this recording on Friday, and then they'll decide what they want to do. So how do you think that process is going to work? Will Barkley and McKinney give the Giants a chance to kind of match or go over whatever another team offers them? Or by letting them out into the wild, are you risking just, all right, they're signing and we're not going to have another chance at these guys?
You might lose them both. So we're going to start from that reality. Barkley's been tagged before, so he's probably the more difficult because there's probably emotion in his equation. McKinney's probably excited that he got a chance to see what the market looks like. And he's entering a group where there's an awful lot of 25, 26, and 27-year-olds in the free agent market. So it'll be interesting. I think people should want to get him, but I think the Giants with their cap space can compete against who's out there and to take them. Now, personally, I probably would have tagged them, so I didn't have to do this. But I think here's what happens. When you say, here's our offer, and he doesn't like it, and it's a big enough difference, you let the market tell him. This was an old Ozzie Newsome trick. Ozzie used to do it all the time. He'd say, you know what, go out and see what's out there, and then give us a chance to compete. So I think McKinney has a better chance. I think Barkley's kind of tied in a negative emotion. He didn't get it. He didn't do a deal last year. He was on the tag, all that business. So I wouldn't worry as much about Barkley. I like it. He's a great player, but I think you can solve that problem in free agency / the draft. Put two guys in there and battle it out and have some depth. So I'm after McKinney if I'm Joe Schoen.
The Giants Huddle podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Giants. From game day to every day, Citizens is made ready for Giants fans with insights, guidance, and solutions. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Yeah, and you know, the thing about it too, Pat, you mentioned that the safety market now, I mean, I'm bringing up my list here. I went through this yesterday. I mean, Geno Stone, 24 years old. Jordan Fuller, 26. Jordan Whitehead, 27. If you're looking for more of a slot safety, C.J. Gardner-Johnson, 26. Deshaun Elliott, 26. Darnell Savage, 26. These are all guys that you can plug in at start at safety, and that doesn't even count all the veterans that just got released, the Kevin Byards, the Eddie Jacksons, the Quandre Diggs, the Micah Hydes, the Jordan Poyer, some of those guys that Joe Shane from his time in Buffalo has a lot of history with too, right? So
Yeah.
I guess it's safety. Even if you can't figure things out, McKinney, you should be able to bring in a guy that can start for you right away. I didn't even mention Justin Simmons at probably not that high of a cost, right?
Yeah. So you have, look, I like that you're a very young team. I would have no problem on a short-term deal doing a 30-plus-year-old guy or two. His knowledge of Poyer, as an example, I would take advantage of that if I was Joe. But if you might be able to throw money. I like Geno Stone, and I like that kind of guy. And so I think you can get a young one. You might be able to get two here, and one to start. And a lot of people want to play big nickel, and because these tight ends flex and there's running backs that play as wide receivers, a lot of coaches want to play big nickel now, and that means three safeties on the field. So you could probably go buy a young one and bring a guy like Poyer in there on a 1 or 2 year deal and be able to really look good in the back end. So I don't want you to lose McKinney, but if you do, you got options.
Yeah, and I think same with Barkley too, right? We talked about the guys at the top of the running back market. Even if the Giants don't go there, the Henrys, the Pollards, the Jacobs, things like that, you go to the next group, Devin Singletary, Zach Moss. Again, two guys that Joe Shane has familiarity with. You want a bigger guy? All right, Dante Foreman, A.J. Dillon. And these are all guys that are going to be in like the $5 million a year type of range. So, they maybe don't have the star power that a Saquon has, but they're going to be pieces there of guys that have started in this league that you can get that are still in their prime and doesn't have a ton of tread off the tire that can help you for a few years.
Yeah, throw Gus Edwards into it. He had 13 touchdowns last year. Local guy, Staten Island. The Giants have they know a lot about the local guys. So, yeah. And again, you want to load up your running back stable, a veteran who knows what he's doing, maybe the guy that can handle first and second down. Maybe you go into the draft for the third down guy or vice versa, but I don't know why you couldn't load up your running back room if you miss on Barkley.
You mentioned the draft. How much do teams look ahead, Pat, at the strength of the draft, where they're picking, projecting what players they might be able to get and might want to be trying to target, and that will impact what positions and guys they go after free agency, because you think, well, maybe we can fill that hole in the draft?
Yeah, I think you have to marry both talent pools, and you just had the combine. It's interesting how the combine's right before the start of free agency to give those GMs and coaches a peek at the talent and kind of sort it out, tie it to your scouts who've been out all fall, and then look at it and say, well, where are the strengths of the draft? Where are the weaknesses of free agency? So you're responding in the right areas. You're going to draft at number 6. I would be looking for my receiver in the draft, and I'd be looking for my big right tackle sooner or later. I don't think you're going down the road of Evan forever, if you will. So I think the draft could provide the receiver that you need. Maybe look, if you had pick 6, Marvin Harrison, Latham, the tackle, Olu, the kid from Penn State tackle, Rome, Dunzier, you're going to get a choice at one of those guys. And I think you could also, if you're not going to take a quarterback there, I'll say this. There's 3 teams down below you that really are worried about each other having a quarterback, the 4th best quarterback fall to them. So when you look at Denver, Minnesota, potentially, and certainly the Raiders, you might get a conversation where you could move down to 12. And I still think you could get a tackle or a big-time wide receiver. So you're in a very good position if you want to do one of those things. As I look at it, and if you just use the Raiders, if they wanted to come up because they're behind Denver, they're behind Minnesota, and they come up and they give you their second-round pick to do it, all of a sudden you have 3 second-round picks, and you're going down to 12 or so. So you need a draft like Detroit had last year. I got a lot of faith in Joe that if you give him that firepower, 3 2s and a 1, and then his next pick is at 70, he could probably deliver you 4 starters from the draft, which I would love to see.
You're ready for a change. Payday comes early with Citizens, so go to that retreat. New You moves to the country. Now you're raising goats and launching a lifestyle brand. Are you ready for all that life brings?
Yeah, I'm with you. I would just hesitate. I think it makes sense. I would be scared to trade out of the possibility of Harrison, Odunze, or Neighbors, because I don't think you get those guys after 10, but you could certainly get a tackle. It's such a good first round tackle class. You could get an offensive tackle anywhere in that
and
top
that's
20.
To your point, John. The free agent tackle list is not very good, so the draft is where it's going to happen. I would say this: whenever I was involved with a trade, we're not going to disclose to our trade partner who we're looking for. This conversation will happen right the week before the draft, and it's going to be this. Yeah, if our guy that we want's not there, yes, we'd move down. And if the guy we want is there, we'd like to move up. So you can set a framework for it. So let's say Harrison and Odunze are gone. Then you'd move down because you can get your tackle. But if you thought one of those guys was there, then you're going to say, hey, sorry, our guy's there. We're going to stay. Those are the conversations I used to have all the time. So you set up the framework, because when the clock's on, it's way too late to start thinking about setting up a trade compensation.
All right, so let me ask you this, because you mentioned quarterback and other teams looking to move up to take a quarterback. There is a sizable section of Giant fans that want them to address the quarterback situation this offseason. Obviously, Daniel Jones coming off a year where he had a second neck injury of his career. He has coming off a torn ACL. All indications are he'll be ready to go by the start of the season. But if you were the Giants, Pat, they don't have anyone else on the contract besides Daniel Jones and Tommy DeVito. You're going to have to add somebody, one or two guys, just to get through OTAs and probably parts of training camp, depending on when Daniel's back. How would you go about this? Would you go veteran free agent? Would you go, all right, maybe day 2 quarterback that you can develop behind Daniel in case he can't figure out a way to stay healthy? How would you go after the quarterback position? Or would you even maybe attack one at 6 if you love a guy?
Well, if I loved one at 6, I'd take him, but I don't think I'm going to love one at 6. I think after the first 3, there is a significant drop-off. Although I have no problems with McCarthy, I just wouldn't take him at 6. Couple things you have to do. First off, you have to assume that Daniel Jones is not going to be ready to start the season. That being said, who do you want to come in and start maybe for the first 6 weeks? And it might be less than that, but who's that guy? So there's a couple of names I'd be approaching. I would be talking about Minshew. He's a guy that came off the bench in Colt Land. He's done it before. I would talk about Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco likes to play, wants to do 2 more years. I was talking to him the other day. He can come in and function. He just proved he can come off a couch and function. So he's interesting. And then I do think you have to start talking about the future. You can get out of Daniel Jones' deal next year, and I believe you could even actually create $8 million of cap space. I'll go back and look at the deal. So I would be looking to take a young guy on the fly here. It doesn't have to be this year if I don't like what I see. Like, I like Penix. I like the lefty. He throws hard. I'm not as worried about the medical as I was a year ago. I've talked to 2 orthopedic guys who say, Pat, you got to stay up with the times. ACLs and Achilles are being repaired at a fast rate, and they are effective. So I like Michael Penix. If you had firepower in the second round, I think you could either move into the bottom of the first to get him and then have the option for 5 years on the guy, or sit there and take him in the second. So I'd be targeting Penix in the second, or if I had 3 2s, I might package it up and go get him at the bottom of the first, which a lot of teams have done in the past just to get the 5th-year option.
All right, let's rewind a little bit. Go head back to free agency for a second here, Pat. When you sit down with your pro personnel guys before the combine, you do all your free agency meetings, right? So you're ready for when this thing starts on Monday. Do you literally have your price point for every guy on the board? All right, him, I'm willing to do this. Him, I'm willing to do that. So when you hit the ground on Monday at noon with this negotiating period, you know what your best offer is going to be for every one of these free agents that you might want to target that aren't on your roster.
Well, in theory, you should have a budget ready to go here. So let me just use like Mike Owenu, the kid out of New England. I think he'd be like a terrific addition to your roster, and he'd be a priority for me.
I agree.
So I might have a much looser mentality about Michael, because I've been in these things where the agent calls you and says, hey, are you in on Michael? Like in this, I used to do Drew Rosenhaus, and I did it multiple times. Are you in on this guy? And this is the opening bid if you want to stay in the race. Yeah, I'm in for that. No problem. An hour later, they call and say, hey, it's up a little bit. It's up 10 million or whatever it's going to be. And you're still in. Yeah, I'm still in. Sooner or later, you get to your boiling point and you got to get out. But you want to stay in on a guy like Michael longer than you might want to stay in Now, there's a corner or two that I'd be interested in if you don't bring a Dory Jackson back, Kendall Fuller, those kind of guys.
Awuzie is good, right?
Yeah. So but I do have budgetary mindset with this. I'm not going to go crazy. I'm not going to go nuts to buy a 30-year-old guy or a 32-year-old. I'm not doing that. But when I see, if I think about it, I can get my tackle in the draft. I can get my receiver in the draft. I like the guards in free agency. I like the tackles in the draft. So I have a couple things. Will I take a shot at Christian Wilkins? Heck yeah, I'll take a shot at him. We'll see what that market's going to be like because you have firepower, $41 million of cap space, and you better use it. You need to use it, and you're not in bad shape. And all these things that are wearing other teams out. You didn't have to put an option year out on a 2021 guy. That's good and bad in a sense. Your restricted tenders are not going to burn you up at all. You don't have voidable deals that are going to haunt you. You don't have a franchise tag player.
Yeah.
The minimum wage stuff, you're not going to worry too much about that. So you're in a position to stay in a fight for a guy like Big Mike up there in New England.
For the guys that you really want, and let's just use Big Mike as an example. If Onwenu is a guy you really want to go after, do you call the agent right at noon on day one and give him your all-in best offer to try to blow him away and get him right away? Or do you play the type of negotiation game you were talking about where you kind of go back and forth with the agent a little bit?
Well, I make my offer to him so he knows I'm serious, and I'd love to sign him on day one. We all know there's going to be a flurry of signings. Most of them are overpriced.
Yep.
But if you need two guards, so this guy solves a lot of things for you. I'll make him my offer, but I don't use the word final because once he gets one more than that, he doesn't even call you back. So I want in on Mike, and I'm going to make a great offer. I'm not going to make a naive offer that's a low ball because I want to see if I can steal him. If you have a player or two that you're committed that you want, get in on it and let them know you're serious. And then I'll say this, you learn this the hard way in this business. It's not so much the flexibility of the dollars, it's the time. If you put a great offer out there, and everyone, Joe knows the market, you put the offer out there that the kid should want to sign, you don't want them shopping that deal. So it's like, hey, it's Monday morning. We want Big Mike. I told you at the combine that we're interested in Mike. Those conversations happened with everybody. And now we're up to the offer. I'm not going to let you take that offer and shop it for 3 days. Nope. This is our offer because I'm going to say to him, look, he's our first choice, but I can't afford to lose him by Wednesday or Thursday. And now the second and the third choices are gone too. So a little bit of a time limit would be advisable.
Giant fans love a winner. It's why they love Citizens, named a 2022 best bank in the U.S. by who else? The Banker. As the official bank of the Giants and sponsor of the Giants Huddle podcast, Citizens is made ready for fans of Big Blue. Learn more at citizensbank.com. Yeah, I'll dig into the guard market in a second, Pat, but you mentioned the combine and all these conversations that happen. It's not tampering. It's just conversations. How much of an idea do these GMs have of what the market on these players is going to be when this bidding process kind of starts on Monday based on talking to these agents before this period begins?
They know. And so there's other things setting the market too, John. Like I talked to Kevin Dotson yesterday at 3:30. You might have been listening.
Yeah, I heard it.
Yeah, and he said, I don't know if I want to play in the cold. He got his deal done almost as he hung up the phone. So that was great. We'll talk to him again today, hopefully. But 3 years, $48 million, $32 million guaranteed. That looks like the framework. So is that the benchmark for Big Mike? Did Kevin Dotson deal set the market? Probably it's now the negotiable item that you can talk around this negotiation with Kevin's deal on the table. And it either is you're going to go above it or try to do the same. But we know one thing, John, you never really go below him anymore. So I think Kevin set the market for guards.
What are the guards? I know Robert Hunt will be another guard I think is kind of at the top of the market. What are the guards in that group do you like that if the Giants can't get a couple of those guys at the top that you might like as fallback positions that could be steady starters for you?
Well, I like Robert Hunt. I even like Connor Williams, who played guard in Dallas before he went to center. So What do I like about them? They're good players. They're high on my little list as well, but they're also on a team that's still over the cap, who's still trying to do their quarterback, who still wants to bring Wilkins back. So, they're vulnerable, the Miami Dolphins. So there's a team I wouldn't mind competing against, because with $41 million in cap space, I can flush them out. Those two guys I like. Now, who else do I like in this whole thing? Not many. So it falls off. I do like Jonah Jackson a bit. Do I like Andres Pete? All those guys in their 30s, I'd rule them all out.
How about Damian Lewis from Seattle? What are your thoughts on him?
Yeah, I like I spent a lot of time in Seattle when Pete was the head coach. We were still very close friends. I got a chance to watch them practice. Pete liked them, but I definitely would have a budget line with him. It wouldn't be the same as Big Mike. No way would it be that. So nope, not even Dalton Reisner. I'm just looking at my list down the thing. John Runyon, another low price guy. So if I have to fall back, if I get to a certain point, 4 or 5 guys into this, I'm just turning to the draft.
No, I'm with you, and I think Onwenu makes a lot of sense because he can be your right tackle insurance then too if Evan Neal doesn't work out at that spot, because he's played there in New England too.
Yeah, I'm willing to pay extra for him.
Yeah, me, and no one's listening to me here, but I happen to agree with you, Pat. 2 other needs in the offseason I want to get to. Corner and pass rusher, I think, Pat. Right now, Azeez Ojulari just hasn't been able to stay healthy, so they need someone across from Kayvon Thibodeau and Shane Bowen's scheme to win one-on-one and rush the quarterback. And then if Adoree Jackson doesn't come back, you mentioned it previously, you're going to need another outside corner. I think you need a slot guy as well, depending on what they think of Cordell Flott. So what do you think of those 2 groups in free agency?
Well, you know what you have in Adoree, and if their grade says he's reasonably stacked. Now, when I did this, the pro personnel part, I had a board in my office, just like a draft board. It was a pro board. And what was on the pro board? All the free agents in the color blue. Then the guys in red were the salary cap casualty guys that are coming onto the list pretty quickly. And in yellow were our guys. So I could stack my players up. And so when the head coach walked in my office, he'd say, what do you think here? I said, well, between the cap casualties and the free agent guys, we have 4 guys better than Adoree Jackson, as an example. And that's just hypothetical. I'm not talking about Adoree that way. Really. So are we going to take a shot at them? Yeah, we can if we want. And go after 1 or 2 of them. I don't like to negotiate with 2 guys at a time. I think it's kind of misleading, so I wouldn't do it. Fuller, I talked to Fuller. I'm going to rule out all and I like Gilmore, but he's 33. Forget it.
I agree.
Kenny Moore's 30. Not doing that. Sean Murphy-Bunting's 27. I might have a grade on him as an example.
I remember Shane Bowen coached him in Tennessee along with Fulton, so I wonder if those connections might help too.
Yeah. First off, coach intel. Coaches generally like to bring in their guys that they've had before. That doesn't mean it's always a good idea. And I used to say to them, in an argumentative way, just because he knows the system doesn't mean he's better than what we have.
Right.
Teach the best guy the system. But a lot of coaches, and I get it, they're living in a short-term world. But I think those are the kind of guys I'd be talking to. Now here come the cuts. And you wonder if any of these guys will interest you. Dante Jackson's 28 years old. Xavier Howard, another guy from Miami, but he's going to think he's going to make a lot of money. Tre'Davious White, if he's healthy. You might be able to find a guy or 2 in there, and there's going to be more cuts. Go look at the 5 or 6 teams that are going to be over the cap by tonight. They still got the weekend to clean this up, but you can look at their corner population and figure out who they're going to have to cut. You might be waiting on somebody right now.
Absolutely. And then it's actually a pretty thick pass rusher class, I think, Pat. Usually you don't get this at pass rusher because usually teams will re-sign their guys. And the one guy that intrigues me, I'd like to get your take on Bryce Huff, who's kind of been a bit of a situational designated pass rusher for the Jets. Not great against the run, but when he rushes the passer, he's darn good. And then you have Danielle Hunter at the top, who Giants defensive line coach Andre Patterson had in Minnesota, which is interesting. He's been a super productive player. Your thoughts on the overall pass rushing class?
Yeah, I think you can go get one, and it's great to get one opposite Thibodeau at this point. I'm glad you didn't mention Chase Young. I would not be interested in him.
The medicals on him, I hear, could be problematic.
Yeah, and he just hasn't produced to the level I like. Clowney's over 30, Floyd's over 30, Autry's over 30, Graham's over 30. So get them all out of the equation. I'm intrigued by a couple of guys, though. Hunter, of course, is the big money guy, and you're going to have to pay him if you go that far. And I don't know that you can justify that because I think your man Thibodeau's coming up on his option year next year. So you got to be thinking about those things. I'm a little bit interested in Van Ginkel. The price might be right. He's a very smart, interesting guy. I would talk about him. But I do like Huff, your man, Mr. Huff. Situational player, fine, but the guy can rush the passer. Up his play percentage by 10%, you might get to 10 sacks on the guy. So I would love a guy like that. Those are the kind of things that I agree totally with you about going after.
You love turf. You're good at it. So you start a turf biz. Business grows, your savings grow. Become the most celebrated name in turf. Are you ready for all that life brings?
All right, final question, Pat, and thank you very much for the time. I know this is a busy time of year for you. How do you decide what guys are the second wave of free agency guys that don't go and are agreeing to terms in these first 3 days before the league year even starts, that maybe aren't going to sign until next Monday, the following Tuesday, the following Wednesday? How do you figure out as a GM which guys are the guys that you can kind of let the market play out, you wait on them, and then you try to get them at the price that you want to get them at?
Yeah, I think let's use inside linebackers. We haven't talked about them at all. I think Frankie Louvu's going to get stuff right away, and Patrick Queen's going to get stuff right away. And they could be gone maybe day 4, day 3, somewhere. You know, inside linebacker is an interesting world, but all I tell people is, do you study the teams that were in the Super Bowl? How do they get to the Super Bowl? Study their roster, and what do you find out about those teams? If you include Baltimore with Kansas City and San Francisco, I'll give you one of the common denominators, all three. They're terrific at inside linebacker, and they didn't lose sight of the importance of it. So let the first two go because you have other priorities, and then you might be looking at somebody else like the kid in Tennessee, Aziz. You might be looking at him. I'm not a big Devin White fan. You might be looking at Josie Jewell. He just makes it under the 30 line. Josh Uche, those like kind of guys.
Yeah.
You know, so those – you'll know because the flurry in the first couple of days, when I spent one offseason with Belichick, it was awesome. And he, at the time, right up till he did the Stephon Gilmore deal, he never jumped into the first 10 days of free agency. He just didn't do it. And he was patient. He held his water, and he just waited it out. And come week 2, he started really recruiting guys. And he loved talking to guys who got burned by not getting the big deal they were hoping for. I'll say this. Almost every veteran I talked to, and if you were listening yesterday when I was talking to the lineman from the Rams, I always ask them the same question because I know the answer. I'm just waiting to have them tell me the truth. 50% of the guys in free agency don't want to be there. They don't like it. They don't like the anxiety that comes with it. They don't like the pressure at home from their wife about it. They really don't like it. And when you get a guy like that who's pretty good and he was nervous and all of a sudden he didn't get hit for the contract in the first 5 or 6 days, he's really ready to take a deal. So that's how deals come down.
Pat Kirwan, former NFL general manager, host of Moving the Chains with Jim Miller, Monday through Friday, 3 to 7 p.m. on Sirius XM NFL Radio, Channel 88. Pat Kirwan, this was great. I always love catching up with you with the Combine, Pat, and talking football with you. Thanks so much for the time. And is there anything else you want to tell the folks about before we say goodbye? The floor is yours.
You know, people have taken shots at the Giants, and look, I work for the Jets, but I understand the Giants. I believe in your head coach. I believe in your GM. They're going to fix this thing and get right back in this race because the Giants have a history of doing it, and these guys will play to the history of this organization and get this thing rolling. It might take 2 years, but it's going to happen.
Pat, good stuff, my friend. We'll talk soon.
All right, bye.
Pat Kirwan, Sirius XM NFL Radio, another Giants Huddle podcast coming your way.